It was a big shock to Kirkcudbright. It seemed such a stupid murder for so little money. There was hardly any money involved at all. And a murder like that on an island in a lighthouse discovered by a chance sailor, this was all a great story. It even reached America. Phantom killer of the lighthouse. The trim little yacht was like a cork on the turbulent waters. Grim-faced and anxious, Thomas Robertson Collin gripped the helm and steered towards the open ocean ahead.
Well, my name is Douglas Molyneux, and I live on Little Ross Island, Kirkcudbright. It's about 30 acres large, and I'm the only person living here. I have a kind of drawbridge mentality, and I rather like the idea of being separated from land. I have been here 9 years now, and I like the challenge of living somewhere rather difficult, and there's no doubt that living here is quite difficult. It is sometimes desolately quiet. You can hear nothing but wind for days on end. And the sound of wind actually gets quite wearing after a while. I have had moments of despair, but never such that I just wanted to give the whole thing up. When I first came here, I had no knowledge of the murky past of the lighthouse cottages. It was subsequent to moving in, really, that I learned that a murder had taken place here. It may have been instrumental in me being able to come here, insofar as perhaps having a murder being committed here deterred others from coming here, and that was why the place was still empty. It certainly hasn't put me off, but I am aware that it has taken place, and so perhaps I treat the house with a little more reverence than you would treat just any building, because someone lost their life here in tragic circumstances. When I first came here, I did think perhaps that a bit like arsonists, do murderers ever revisit the scene of their crime? And if this chap ever comes out of jail, would he want to come back to Little Ross and see if there's anybody else he could bump off? I soon put that aside when I learned that he'd committed suicide. That was quite a relief, I suppose. The very first room I stayed in was the room in which the murder was committed. But I did find that that room was extremely cold, impossible to heat, even with a fire on. And it was partly for that reason that we decided that we would demolish that room effectively. And since doing that, we've lost the coldness. There is a feeling that I'm not alone here. I get that sometimes. Usually when the weather's poor, I'm aware of a presence in the form of the shadow of a human being. That's all I can describe it as. Hovering around in the house or passing a window outside. And it's more than just the shadow of a seagull against the sun or something like that. It's the sort of thing that makes you look up from whatever you're doing and be prepared to greet someone, but then find there's nobody there.
There's nothing about the flat that really reminds me of the fact that somebody was murdered here. It's not spooky at all. I mean, if it were a huge house with long, dark and creaky corridors, I suppose you would be looking for the spookiness in the house. My mother stayed here. She was quite intrigued, you know. I told her that, you know, there was this playwright. He'd been murdered here by his lover, and his head was beaten, was crashed open by a hammer.
This is the main room of the flat. It is a studio, so this is obviously the bedroom as well.
And the living room.
Yeah.
And the reception.
Exactly.
The bathroom is essentially the same as in Orton's day. The bath and the loo were here. It's space to escape from each other.
I can imagine at the time it must have been very claustrophobic, because apparently Joe Orton was inside writing, and he was here with his partner all the time.
Can we go past the theatre?
Oh, no, I knew you'd say that. I knew. This is supposed to be my night.
Actually, I just want to get out of this fucking room.
I'd better have my Valium now.
It doesn't look anything like what it used to look like back then. The ceiling had, what was it, pink and yellow?
Pink and yellow tiles, yes.
Black and white tiles on the floor.
The walls were entirely taken up by the murals that Halliwell was doing.
That he was sent to prison for, because he sort of defaced the library books and cut them out.
It's just, where are we? Just down here is number 25. Here we are, right outside. If we come across this side...
The Orton Walk, which happens every
other Saturday
or something, is the main intrusion.
It's up there, really more of a bed-sitter than a flat. It really is just one large room with a kitchen behind and a small bathroom.
It's a reasonable hour on a Saturday morning when most people would be getting up and be looking out the window, and there is a crowd of people staring up at you.
You knocked on the door, and sort of a little old lady who lived in the ground floor opened the window and said, "Yes?" And you say, "I want to see the gentleman upstairs." "Who?" "Mr. Halliwell, Mr. Orton." "Oh, them boys," she'd say. And she'd let you in, and you'd go upstairs to a sort of a smell of cabbage and corned beef and that sort of thing.
We had the Orton Society back in May. We had about 10 people in here, tramping around and
taking photographs of themselves near the window.
You get the occasional letter from drama students who are putting on a production of Loot or something, and
who say that
want to get the aura of the character by coming to the flat. The history of the flat can only add value. We've had interest from people who saying, if you ever sell, I would be very interested in buying because
it is Joe Orton's former flat. Yeah.
This is number 21 Cranley Gardens, where we are now, and over the fence is number 23, where Dennis Nilsen did all his activities. I've lived here since 1950, so of course I was around during that time.
First heard what was going on was when a policeman came to the front door and said to me something rather unpleasant has happened next door. So I said, "Oh, which way?" Because I was standing in the hall there, and I said, "Which way?" Because the man next door just punched his wife. So I thought, he's done her in, you see. But it was the other way. I just thought it was unpleasant, especially in view of all the blue bottles. Revolting they were. And I also noticed that the man next door pulled a lot of rubbish bags out. Of course, I was inundated with the press from all over the place. Even the Daily Telegraph rang up. They didn't come round, but they did ring up. I'm afraid I've got a rather dirty mind, because a lot of these young men come into the house, and I thought it was the girl there that they were after, never dreaming it was right upstairs. I thought, oh, little so-and-so, she's got all these young men coming round, you see.
I don't think anyone was in any danger here anyway, because it seems most of the victims he picked up were people that couldn't be accounted for. And I don't think he would have been daft enough to have taken out any of the neighbours.
Quite a presentable young man with going to work with his business suit, collar and tie, and off he went up the hill. Pair of glasses on, he looked quite normal. I sort of nodded to him and said hello. Yeah, that was Dennis.
We had, in fact, more trouble with ghouls for a while after the events finished than we ever did with the press or the police.
Oh, they were dreadful.
But the ghoulish people, I think, were just, well, just the pits, really. To use an expression of John McEnroe.
Years afterwards, they brought coach loads of people, and they all stopped and they were all gulping up, all had a look, and they all drove on, and that's gone on for a long time. And every time I give my address, Cranley Gardens, they say, I say, yes, next door.
There's two lots of builders have been at it, and the police took away all the bits and pieces from the kitchen and other parts of the flat and resurrected it all in the Black Museum, apparently. So there's not really much of a trace of Nilsen and the house as it was.
Beautiful flats next door. They seem to be quite happy coming out in the garden with their barbecues and things. And I suppose it depends on the person, but there was an article in the local paper and some woman had said, oh, she couldn't stand it in there, she couldn't spend the night in there or something, and she was all going hysterical over it. I mean, it's 12, 15 years ago, isn't it? I don't know why. Perhaps she was one of these that feels the atmosphere. Doesn't worry me.
I don't think Cranley Gardens will ever live it down. After all, Rillington Place is still remembered years and years after. So I think Cranley Gardens and Cromwell Street will be remembered probably forever now.
There has been speculation about whether the name of the street should be changed. If the people who live in Cromwell Street want the name changed, then we will very likely do something about it. We believe that the only thing that should happen to 25 Cromwell Street is that it should be completely demolished.